After my fiancée and her two sisters stabbed me for their first love, I lay in my hospital bed, smiling as I paid off every media outlet to destroy his reputation overnight. Then, without so much as a goodbye, I deleted all my social media accounts, faked my own funeral, left the country, and changed my number. 5 years later, at a lavish high society gala, I saw her again, Chloe, the second sister, the one I was supposed to marry. As the second daughter of the powerful Sutherland family, she sat in the front row, while I, a mysterious guest, watched from a corner on the second floor. The moment the host announced her name, the room filled with thunderous applause. She rose and walked gracefully to the stage. In the spotlight, she was even more radiant and composed than 5 years ago, but the fiery spirit of the young prodigy she once was seemed to have been smoothed away. The woman beside me whispered in admiration, "I hear Miss Sutherland is getting married soon." I remained silent, my eyes fixed calmly on the stage. Chloe's speech was brief. When she finished, her gaze swept across the crowd as if she were searching for someone. Her eyes locked precisely on my location. I couldn't make out her expression from so far away, but I knew she had seen me. I left the gala early. Just as I reached the backstage corridor, someone blocked my path. "My love," Chloe said, her voice much raspier than I remembered. She stood in front of me, her eyes churning with emotions I couldn't decipher. I stood frozen, my mind flashing back to the moment all ties with Chloe were severed. 3 years prior, the Sutherlands were targeted by their rivals, and I, their adopted son, was abducted and forced to work in an illegal mine in West Virginia. When I finally escaped that hell and made it home, I found Chloe, my fiancée, marrying another man, with her sisters Olivia and Stella smiling and offering their blessings. It turned out that because a man named Julian bore a striking resemblance to me, they had transferred all their guilt and affection onto him. I forced them to choose between Julian and me, and all three chose me. But that very night, my adoptive mother, in a state of delirium, set the mansion ablaze, dying in the inferno with Julian. That fire transformed us from family into bitter enemies. They blamed me, saying my inability to accept Julian had cost them the person they held most dear. Verbal abuse and physical beatings became a part of my daily life, until I began vomiting blood and was diagnosed with terminal stomach cancer. But as I stepped out of the doctor's office, I saw them, my adoptive mother and Julian, both supposedly dead, accompanying Chloe to a prenatal appointment. Olivia and Stella hovered around Chloe, while Julian pressed his ear to her stomach, a look of pure bliss on his face. The blood froze in my veins as I prepared to confront them. Olivia's voice drifted over. "After this, Ethan has finally learned his lesson." Stella immediately shot back, "No way. If he finds out Julian is alive and that Chloe's having his baby, there's no telling what he'll do. We need to keep breaking his spirit before the baby is born. Make sure he stays completely in line." In that instant, it felt like the blood was rushing backward through my veins. I wanted to scream at the heavens and ask why I was being treated so unfairly. I was the one who had been kidnapped and tortured, yet they showered Julian with all the love and atonement meant for me. All I wanted was to return to how things were, but instead, they tormented me with this cruel lie. But they didn't know I had less than a month to live. I wouldn't even be around to see that child born. I fled the hospital as if escaping a nightmare. Stumbling through the front door of the house, a searing pain ripped through my stomach. I coughed, and a torrent of blood spilled from my mouth, staining my shirt and soaking into my pants. As I was on my hands and knees, miserably trying to clean the floor, Chloe entered, carefully guiding a man by the arm. She tossed a sheet of paper at me. "These are the house rules for the staff. You'll follow them from now on." I stared at the page, covered in tiny print, and asked in a raspy voice, "What is this?" Chloe frowned. "We found Julian's twin brother, Caleb. He's been ill and needs someone to look after him." She paused, her gaze condescending. "If you take good care of him, we'll forgive you for everything you've done once he's better." My eyes fell on the man's face, a perfect copy of Julian's, and I understood everything perfectly. I lowered my head, my voice unnervingly calm. "I'll take care of him." From that day forward, I dragged my frail body around, numbly executing the list of sadistic demands. And of course, the man pretending to be Caleb, who was actually Julian, made my life hell at every opportunity. Why isn't there any fish in this sweet and sour pork? How many times do I have to tell you? The water from my foot bath must be exactly 113 degrees. I endured it all in silence. Then, at 3 in the morning, Julian decided he wanted freshly grilled steaks. Despite the burns covering my hands, I brought the steaks to him. Just then, a gust of wind blew a bit of smoke in his direction. He immediately shrieked, "The smoke! Are you trying to choke me?" Hearing his cries, the 3 sisters rushed over, and Julian instantly put on a pitiful act. Chloe immediately took his side, grabbing a fistful of my hair. "Admit you were wrong, and I'll let this go. Otherwise, I'll give you a lesson you'll never forget." I looked up at her and said, enunciating every word, "I did nothing wrong. It was the wind." Before I could finish, I was dragged into the center of the courtyard. My hands were bound with a thick rope, and the other end was tied to the back of 3 heavy motorcycles. Olivia, Chloe, and Stella mounted the bikes, their eyes cold and merciless as they looked down at me. The hot exhaust blasted against my ear. Like a dry leaf caught in a storm, I was thrown onto the rough concrete, then dragged, scraped, and tumbled across the ground, leaving a trail of blood dozens of yards long. Before I blacked out, all I could feel was my skin burning away and my bones being torn from their sockets. I woke up wrapped in bandages, every breath a sharp intake of pain. I heard a doctor's angry voice nearby. "You're Ethan's family? How could a patient with terminal cancer possibly endure injuries this severe?" I wanted to stop him, but it was too late. The doctor was already handing them my diagnosis. I closed my eyes, listening to the beeping of the monitor and the frantic pounding of my own heart. Suddenly, the butler burst in, looking flustered. "Miss, it's Mr. Julian. He refuses to eat until he sees you. He's throwing a tantrum." Chloe's hand, which had been reaching for the report, snapped back. The 3 sisters exchanged a look, a silent agreement passing between them. They didn't spare me another glance. The doctor picked up the report and looked around the now empty room, a flicker of bewildered embarrassment on his face. Perhaps they didn't hear me correctly. "I'll call them right now." I reached out and tugged on his coat, forcing a smile that was more agonizing than tears. The doctor finally sighed and left the room. I was alone with the monotonous beeping of the machines. During my time in the hospital, the spreading cancer and infected wounds tortured me relentlessly. The nurses changed my blood-soaked sheets again and again. The doctor called me into his office for an urgent consultation, his tone graver than ever. "Ethan, you need to start at least a month of intensive treatment immediately. Otherwise, you won't even make it 2 weeks." I felt like I was hearing his words from underwater. I gave a slow, slight nod and then discharged myself from the hospital. As I reached the hospital entrance, 3 figures emerged from the glare of the sun, blocking my path. Stella pulled out 2 voodoo dolls riddled with pins and threw them at my feet. "We found these in your room. What do you have to say for yourself, Ethan? Our mother and Julian are gone, and you're still using these disgusting tricks to curse his memory." I looked from the dolls on the ground to Julian, who was hiding behind them with a smug look on his face. I knew this was his work. Chloe stared at me, a last glimmer of hope in her eyes. "Tell me it wasn't you." I opened my mouth to speak, but my throat was so dry that no sound came out. Chloe's patience finally snapped. She gestured coldly to their bodyguards. "Since he loves pins so much, let's put every single one of them back into him. Let's see how he likes it." The guards grabbed me, holding me down as they mercilessly plunged the steel pins into my arms, my shoulders, my back. The agony forced a grunt from my lips, and my body trembled uncontrollably. I clenched my jaw and endured it until the last pin was driven in. Only then did Chloe speak. "Have you learned your lesson?" With my eyes closed, I answered in a numb, hollow voice, "I was wrong." Finally satisfied, the 3 women turned and left. As the onlookers dispersed, I began pulling the steel pins from my skin, one by one. In the distance, an advertisement for a funeral home caught my eye. As if in a trance, I walked over to it. "Excuse me," I said to the man inside. "Can you plan a funeral for me?" The man stared at me for a second, but then, without asking any questions, he pulled out a contract. "Of course, sir. Do you need us to notify any family?" I shook my head. "No." He paused for a moment. "Then if you'll just sign here, we can make the arrangements." I took the pen and signed my name. Then I went back to that house. When I opened the door, Olivia was on the sofa, casually flipping through a forensic textbook. She looked at my filthy, disheveled state and scoffed. "You managed to crawl back on your own. You must be feeling energetic." Chloe came downstairs and shot me a cold look. "He's not dying. Let him throw his fits. If he actually manages to get himself killed, I won't lift a finger. He'll have brought it on himself." I didn't answer, just dragged my body up the stairs, one step at a time. As I passed Julian's room, a voice from inside made me freeze. "The plan is almost complete. Those 3 Sutherland idiots are so easy to manipulate. All I have to do is beckon, and they come running like pathetic little dogs. As for that adopted son, Ethan, they're about to torture him to death for me. Saves me the effort." My blood ran cold. I opened the voice recorder app on my phone and crept closer to the door. Ethan still has no idea, does he, that I worked with your people to get him sent to that mine. That after he was gone, I deliberately put myself in the Sutherland's path. A wave of pure hatred washed over me, threatening to drown me. I threw open the door. Julian, it was you. The sudden intrusion startled him, but when he saw it was me, his expression twisted into a sneer. So what if it was? I gritted my teeth. Aren't you afraid I'll tell them everything? He blinked, then roared with laughter. Tell them? And you think they'd believe you? Before the words were out of his mouth, he pulled out a knife, forced it into my hand, and dragged his own arm across the blade, drawing blood. He let out a piercing scream. He's trying to kill me. The door burst open and two figures rushed in. Olivia screamed at me. Ethan, have you lost your mind? I yelled back, no, he's setting me up. Chloe didn't listen. She lunged forward, grabbing my wrist and trying to tear the knife from my hand. Let go right now or I swear I'll make you. I saw the raw, murderous intent in her eyes, and my heart felt like it was being shredded. I tried again to explain, please, just listen to me. He's a fraud. A soft, wet sound cut through the air, and time seemed to stop. All the shouting ceased. I looked down in disbelief. The cold steel of the knife was buried deep in my stomach. Warm liquid flowed down the blade, dripping from the hand Chloe still had wrapped around the hilt. Drip, drip. Chloe stared at her hand on the knife, her voice trembling. I didn't mean to. I just didn't want you to hurt Julian. I managed a weak, bitter smile. I didn't have the strength to hear any more as my body collapsed to the floor. Darkness washed over me like a tide. I woke up again in a hospital days later. The room was empty, but my phone was buzzing on the nightstand. It was a call from Chloe. I answered the call mechanically. Chloe's voice came through the speaker, her tone less icy than before. Ethan, it's Julian's birthday party tonight. I want you to be there. I have something important to tell you. In the background, I could faintly hear Olivia saying, no, not yet. The time isn't right. Chloe's voice suddenly sharpened with an uncontrollable anger. I've had enough. I'm not waiting anymore. So her heart had finally softened. It didn't matter. It was far too late for that. While they argued, I asked in a faint voice, Chloe, can you and the others just spend today with me? The people from the funeral home were on their way. There was a long silence on the other end. Olivia spoke first. I wish you would stop making these selfish demands, especially on days that are important to Julian. I didn't bother waiting to hear Chloe's reply. I just ended the call. After hanging up, I didn't go back to the mansion. Instead, I went to the old family estate in upstate New York, the house where the Sutherlands lived when they first adopted me. By the time the funeral director arrived, Julian's birthday party was being live-streamed across the internet. I watched the screen. Julian was in a designer suit, the center of attention, surrounded by adoring guests. Chloe, Olivia, and Stella stood by his side in elegant gowns, their faces beaming with affection. A bitter smile touched my lips. They had forgotten. Today was also the anniversary of the day they adopted me. Every year on this day, they used to throw a huge party for me. I set my phone down and sat quietly before the tarnished mirror in the old house. The funeral director patiently dressed me in a finely tailored black suit, combed my hair perfectly into place, and then gently placed a simple woven wreath upon my head. The face in the mirror was ashen. Weakened by the cancer, my head listed to one side. I looked down at the faded photograph in my hands. It was a family portrait from 10 years ago, with me in the center, surrounded by smiling faces. I shuffled into the yard like an old man approaching his grave, my eyes fixed on the withered old cherry tree. In my mind's eye, the tree was alive again, its branches bursting with new blossoms that filled the air. The sound of a child's happy laughter echoed around me. I saw 3 teenage girls running excitedly toward a small boy. This is our new brother. He's so cute. The little boy, me, stood awkwardly under the cherry tree in a worn-out shirt, clutching a tattered rag doll. His face is all dirty, Olivia and Stella said, both trying to wipe my cheeks with their handkerchiefs. My new mother gently stroked my hair. From now on, she said, you are my son. Chloe stared at me, captivated. Mom, he's so cute. Can I marry him when I grow up? Her mother chuckled. You silly girl. That will depend on if you're fortunate enough. A breeze rustled through my hair and stirred the leaves of the wreath. The tree that had once been so full of life was now just a withered skeleton. Like me, it had reached the end. My phone vibrated again. A message from Chloe popped up on the screen. Ethan, where are you? Why aren't you here yet? This is urgent. Tell me where you are and I'll come to you. I watched her messages appear one after another, my thumb stroking the screen. Finally, I typed out 2 short replies. Chloe, I wish I could go back to the day you all adopted me. The cherry tree at the old estate is dead. It's my time to leave too. Then, I opened the audio file I had saved and placed the phone on the windowsill. The wind rustled the dead leaves at my feet. I walked across the overgrown lawn, step by step, toward the old tree. A childhood lullaby echoed in my mind, a faint melody from a distant past. Firefly, firefly, shining so bright. I hummed the tune softly as I leaned against the dead cherry tree. I took a lighter from my pocket and set fire to the sleeve of my beautiful suit. Warmth enveloped me, and the painful memories began to evaporate in the flames. I slowly closed my eyes, as if drifting off to sleep. From that moment on, I was free. I was released. I was finally unbreakable. Back at Julian's birthday party, Chloe's heart was pounding in her chest. An overwhelming sense of dread threatened to swallow her whole. She turned to run out of the ballroom to find me, but Olivia grabbed her arm. "Where are you going? Julian's party isn't over." Chloe's voice was laced with a panic Olivia had never heard before as she shoved her phone in her sister's face. "Olivia, look, Ethan says he's leaving us." Stella leaned in to look, her brow furrowed in concern. Olivia just frowned, her voice filled with her usual dismissive confidence. "Where would he go? Remember when he was a kid and he'd run away? He always just went to the park to cry until we found him. This is no different." Chloe shook her head. "No, this time feels different." She couldn't explain it, but the feeling that she was about to lose something precious was becoming unbearable. She pulled her arm free from Olivia's grasp, but just as she was about to leave, her mother called out, "Chloe, Julian fell. He's hurt. Come quickly." Just then, Olivia's phone rang. Her face paled as she listened. "What? A suicide by self-immolation? I'm on my way." She hung up and spoke quickly to Chloe. "There was a suicide at that old estate district north of the city. I have to get over there for the preliminary examination." Chloe's heart plummeted. The old estate district? Wasn't their family's old house there? "Olivia, wait," she started to say, but her sister had already vanished into the crowd. Stella patted Chloe's arm. "Olivia has to work. Let's go check on Julian. It sounds like he's really hurt. As for Ethan," she paused, "we can look for him later. We should at least stay until Julian cuts his cake." Chloe watched her sisters retreating back, then looked toward Julian, who was still on the floor inside. Taking a deep breath, she pushed down her anxiety and went to him. He immediately limped into her embrace. "Ethan didn't come to my party. Does he still hate me? I bet he's just trying to pull some trick to get you to run after him." Seeing Julian's tears, Mrs. Sutherland quickly came to his defense. "He's just an adopted son. We raised him and we've done more than enough for him. If he can't accept you, Julian, then he's the one who should leave. This family doesn't revolve around his whims." Chloe's face was grim, but she said nothing. Julian saw his opening and placed a hand on her stomach. "Chloe, I know you're worried about Ethan, but please, can you just stay with me until my birthday is over? Just this once. For our baby." At the mention of the baby, Chloe's fists clenched. She touched her still flat stomach, and her hands slowly relaxed. Julian's tears immediately turned to a smile. Forgetting his supposed injury, he pulled her toward the birthday cake. In the flickering candlelight, Julian closed his eyes to make a wish. "I wish our family can be together forever, and that our baby is born healthy and strong." Outside, brilliant fireworks lit up the night sky. But inside, Chloe's heart was hammering against her ribs. Just then, the butler rushed in. "There's a man at the door from a funeral home. He says he has urgent business with you." "A funeral home?" Mrs. Sutherland's face twisted in disgust. "On Julian's special day? What terrible luck. Send him away." Through her mother's angry words, the thread of Chloe's composure finally snapped. She ripped her arm away from Julian, pushed through the crowd, and ran outside. The man at the door saw her coming and asked with a somber expression, "Excuse me, are you a relative of Mr. Ethan Miller?" Chloe hesitated for a moment before answering. "His sister." The man handed her a document bearing my signature. "Mr. Miller hired us to prepare for a funeral at your family's old estate. We arranged everything as he asked, but then he told us to leave." The man paused, his voice thick with emotion. "When we went back, we found that he had set himself on fire." The fireworks continued to burst in the sky, but for Chloe, it felt as if her entire world had just exploded. The boom of the fireworks filled her ears. The man's mouth was moving, but she couldn't hear his words anymore. Was this a dream? She raised her hand and slapped herself, hard. The stinging pain was a brutal confirmation. It wasn't a dream, but if it wasn't a dream, why would her Ethan kill himself? "Impossible," she whispered, over and over. Then, She lunged forward and grabbed the man's collar. "Tell me, how much did he pay you to tell me this sick joke?" She shook her head frantically. "This isn't funny. Where is he? Tell him to come out here right now." The man choked, his face turning red. "Ma'am, please, Mr. Miller's remains are at the old estate. If you don't believe me, you can go and see for yourself." Chloe let go, stumbling backward. Julian, who had followed her out, heard the man's words and immediately rushed to her side, clinging to her. "Chloe, see? I told you. He'd do anything to tear us apart, even lie about being dead." Stella, who had come out right behind him, froze in place. Ethan was dead? Chloe didn't care about Julian's theatrics. She shoved him away. As the funeral home's car sped toward the estate, the city lights blurred into streaks outside her window. The car screeched to a halt in front of the old estate. Chloe moved like a marionette, walking to the gate and pushing it open. The acrid smell of smoke filled the air. The yard was devastated. The great cherry tree was nothing but a blackened stump, a few embers still glowing in the dark. Olivia was crouched beside a charred body at the base of the tree, her expression focused as she conducted her initial examination. She looked up at the sound of their arrival, her face showing a flicker of surprise. "Chloe? Stella? What are you two doing here?" Chloe's eyes were fixed on the burned, unrecognizable body. Her voice trembled. "Olivia, who is that?" Olivia sighed. "I have no idea. Someone so young. I can't imagine why they'd come all the way out to our abandoned property to kill themselves." She didn't intend to continue, but Chloe's stare was insistent, demanding an answer. Olivia sighed, adjusting her glasses, and slipped into her professional, detached tone. "Preliminary findings suggest a male, approximately 26 years old. He was suffering from cancer. Evidence of repeated blunt force trauma, severe abrasions consistent with being dragged, and bite marks from a large canine on the lower legs." Olivia suddenly stopped. Her words came slower, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Multiple puncture wounds across the entire body. Some steel pins were left embedded in the tissue." The notepad slipped from her hand and fell to the ground. How had she not seen it before? Every single injury she had just described was a perfect match for Ethan. Olivia staggered back, her professional composure shattering. Nearby, her assistant was carefully placing the phone from the windowsill into an evidence bag. "That's Ethan's phone," Stella screamed, lunging for it. "I'm sorry, Miss Sutherland," the assistant said, holding the bag away from her. "This is evidence. It has to be sealed." That was the final straw. Chloe's sanity finally snapped. She whirled around and grabbed Olivia by the collar. "You're the expert, Olivia. You tell me that's not him. Tell me that's not Ethan." She shook her sister so violently that Olivia's legs gave out, and she crumpled to the ground. Olivia's silence was the most brutal answer of all. Every piece of evidence pointed to one, cold, undeniable fact. The burned body was Ethan's. And with that realization, Chloe completely shattered. She threw herself forward, wrapping her arms around the charred remains. "I was wrong, Ethan. I was so wrong. Please just look at me one more time. I don't want anything else. I just want you back." As she sobbed, Olivia and Stella knelt beside her, tears streaming down their faces. "Ethan, we're so sorry, but it was too late." The funeral director watched their belated remorse without a shred of pity. "Mr. Miller mentioned that he had hoped to have his family with him before he passed. Did he not contact you?" Chloe's sobs caught in her throat. She remembered his weak, pleading voice on the phone. She carefully lifted the body, her movements as gentle as if she were holding a lover. "It's okay, Ethan. Don't be afraid. I'm taking you home now. We're going home." It all felt like a dream. I was cremated, reduced to ash, and placed in a simple white urn. Chloe locked herself in her room, refusing to eat or drink. She just held the urn day after day, whispering memories of our childhood. Every word she spoke was like a knife carving into her own heart. Finally, she collapsed from starvation. In her delirium, she felt someone holding her gently. "You must be starving, Chloe. I made your favorite shrimp dumplings. Won't you have some?" Chloe's eyes snapped open, and she instinctively clung to the person before her. "Ethan, I'm so sorry. I'll never leave you again." But when her vision cleared and she saw it was Julian, a wave of pure rage washed over her. She shoved him away. "Who let you in here?" Julian stumbled to the floor but persisted, holding the bowl out to her again. "I know it's hard to accept that Ethan is gone, but you can't bring him back. You have to cherish the people who are still here." In response, Chloe swatted the bowl from his hands, sending it crashing to the floor. Hot soup splashed all over him. Chloe pointed at the door. "I said get out. Are you deaf?" Julian scrambled to his feet and fled the room. Her phone began to vibrate insistently. It was Olivia. Chloe didn't want to answer, but the ringing was relentless, suggesting something urgent. She finally accepted the call. Olivia's voice on the other end was trembling with shock and horror. "Chloe, we found it. On Ethan's phone. A recording of Julian. We never knew who he really was." Chloe's heart sank as a terrible suspicion formed in her mind. Ethan's death, it was connected to Julian. Without a moment's hesitation, she drove to the police station. As the recording played in her ears, Chloe's world fell apart. Back at the Sutherland mansion, Julian, his face red and swollen from the hot soup, complained to Mrs. Sutherland. "I was only trying to get Chloe to eat, and she attacked me. All because of Ethan." Mrs. Sutherland trembled with rage. "That boy is becoming more and more trouble. Does he think the world revolves around him? I'm done with his games. I'll tell him myself. He is no longer a son of this family." Julian was secretly delighted, but put on an even more pitiful expression. "Mom, you have to talk to Chloe when she gets back. She's going to be a mother soon. She shouldn't be thinking about another man." Mrs. Sutherland stroked his hair tenderly. "Of course, dear. Chloe is a good daughter. She'll listen to me." Just then, the front door flew open, and Chloe and Olivia strode in, their faces like thunderclouds. Mrs. Sutherland immediately pointed an accusing finger at Chloe. "You ungrateful girl! How dare you harm Julian over that wretched boy?" She paused, looking behind them. "Where is Ethan? Is he still not back? Tell him to get home this instant and apologize to Julian." Olivia cut her off. "He can't apologize." Mrs. Sutherland scoffed, her anger rising. "And why not? Does he think he's too important? What's his excuse? Is he dead?" Chloe said nothing. She walked into the other room and returned holding the simple white urn. She held it out toward her mother. "Ethan is right here." Mrs. Sutherland stared at the urn, her lips moving silently. Then she let out a derisive laugh. "This again? Faking his death? We already played that game when he first came back. Do you take me for a fool?" Seeing her mother's disbelief, Olivia slapped the autopsy report and death certificate down on the coffee table. "He's really dead, Mom. I did the autopsy myself." The room fell silent. With a trembling hand, Mrs. Sutherland picked up the report. She saw the photo of the charred remains, and the world went dark. Olivia caught her just before she hit the floor. "My Ethan! My boy!" Mrs. Sutherland wailed, collapsing into Olivia's arms. Julian, seeing his opportunity, rushed to comfort her. "Ethan may be gone, but you still have me, and you have your grandchild on the way. I'll take care of you, Mom." Mrs. Sutherland clung to him. Chloe strode forward, ripped Julian out of her mother's arms, and slapped him across the face with all her might. The sharp crack echoed through the silent living room. One side of Julian's face immediately began to swell. He clutched it, his eyes wide with fear and shock. "Chloe, are you insane? What does Ethan's death have to do with me? Why did you hit me?" Mrs. Sutherland wiped her tears and pulled Julian behind her. "Chloe, stop it. We're all grieving. You have no right to take your anger out on Julian." Chloe stared at Julian, her eyes burning with a deadly hatred. She took out my phone, played the recording, and turned the volume all the way up. Julian's voice filled the room. "The plan is almost complete. Those 3 Sutherland idiots are so easy to manipulate. All I have to do is beckon and they come running like pathetic little dogs. As for that adopted son, Ethan, they're about to torture him to death for me. Saves me the effort. Ethan still has no idea, does he, that I worked with your people to get him sent to that mine. That after he was gone, I deliberately put myself in the Sutherland's path. A perfect replacement, you see? I watched you get dragged away, sold into slavery in that mine, starving, freezing, beaten every day. You have no idea how much pleasure that gave me. We look so much alike. So why did you get to live in luxury, coddled and adored? I had to destroy you and take everything that was yours. And as for those 3 sisters, their turn is coming very soon." Julian's venomous words echoed through the silent living room. The color drained from his face, leaving it a ghostly white. Stella, who had just come downstairs, stopped dead in her tracks, staring in disbelief. After the recording finished, Mrs. Sutherland stood stunned for a long moment. Then, she lunged forward and grabbed Julian by the hair. "Is it true? Tell me, why did you just happen to appear in our lives right then?" Julian cried out in pain, his face twisting. I was. He desperately searched for a lie, but his mind was blank. Enraged, Stella grabbed a vase from the coffee table and smashed it over Julian's head. "Tell the truth," she screamed, "or I swear I will kill you right here." The vase shattered, and a mixture of water and blood ran down his face. Trembling, he collapsed to his knees. "It was me. I worked with your family's rivals. I used Ethan's kindness to lure him into a trap, and they took him to the mine." Hearing this, Chloe, her heart completely dead, looked up, tears streaming down her face. "What else? You had better tell me everything." He prostrated himself at her feet. "I found out the route you were taking to search for Ethan, and I waited there, hoping you would find me and I could take his place. In return, I stole corporate secrets and gave them to your rivals. I planted the voodoo dolls in Ethan's room for you to find, and Ethan never tried to kill me. He found out the truth, and I was terrified he would tell you." He grabbed the hem of her pants, his face streaked with tears. "But I had to. I just wanted to be loved. I was so jealous of him." Mrs. Sutherland pointed a shaking finger at him. "You wanted to be loved? And what did my Ethan ever do to deserve what you did to him?" Julian made one last desperate attempt. "Mom, Chloe, Olivia, Stella, Ethan is already dead. It's not like I killed him. Can't we just go back to the way things were and be a happy family? Are you really going to throw everything away for a dead man?" Olivia couldn't stand it anymore. She lunged forward and kicked him hard in the chest. "Everything you have, you stole from Ethan. How dare you say that?" Julian fell backward, but scrambled back to Chloe's feet. "Chloe, please, you're pregnant with my child. For our baby's sake, please, forgive me. We can start over. We can pretend this never happened." Chloe looked up at the ceiling, as if remembering something. "You know, Julian, I'd almost forgotten. I can handle my alcohol. So how did I get blackout drunk after just one drink with you? I woke up and you told me I'd slept with you. And soon after that, I was pregnant." A cold dread washed over her as she looked into his guilty eyes. "You drugged me," she said, her voice flat. "It was all part of your plan." Julian started sobbing. "Chloe, I'm sorry, but the baby is innocent." But Chloe wasn't looking at him anymore. She turned to her sister. "Olivia, call the hospital. Schedule an abortion for me." Julian's sobs stopped instantly. He slumped to the floor in stunned silence. He couldn't believe it. She was getting rid of their child, all for a dead man. If she didn't care about the baby, she certainly didn't care about him. The house staff came and hauled the boneless Julian to his feet. Julian stared blankly for a moment, and then a twisted, malicious smile spread across his face. He looked at each of them, his laughter echoing in the room. "And you think you're all so innocent?" He turned to Mrs. Sutherland, his voice dripping with venom. "You old witch, you're no better. The moment Ethan came back a cripple, you decided he wasn't good enough for your precious Chloe. Faking the deaths and setting the fire might have been my idea, but every single one of you went along with it." He pointed at the three sisters. "You're the ones who tied him to the motorcycles and dragged him like an animal. You're the ones who drove those pins into his skin. And you, Chloe, you're the one who put that knife in his stomach." He laughed, tears streaming down his face. "What did I really do? I just fanned the flames a little. You were the ones who couldn't wait to destroy him. And now you blame me? Do you think punishing me will make it better? It won't. From his grave, Ethan is cursing all of you. You're the executioners. He's cursing you to die a miserable death." His words were like a slap in the face to each of them. The accusation was too much for Mrs. Sutherland. She fainted. Chloe stood with her eyes closed, listening silently until his tirade was over and the room was quiet again. "He's right. We all killed Ethan. And now we all have to pay for it." She looked at the stunned Julian. "Take him outside. Lock him in the dog kennel." After Julian was dragged away, Chloe drove back to the old estate alone. She walked into the yard in a daze and knelt beneath the blackened cherry tree, burying her face in her knees and sobbing. Soon after, Chloe had the abortion. With that final tie severed, all that remained in her heart was a bottomless hatred, the kind that consumes everything. When Chloe opened the door to the kennel, Julian, who was chained inside, looked up sharply. After days of isolation, he was finally seeing her again. But his relief quickly turned to terror. He watched her approach, a vicious look in her eyes he had never seen before. Julian began to plead. "Chloe, please, I'll leave. I swear I'll never bother you again." She ignored him, unlocking his chains only to grab him by the arm and drag him toward the road. Using the same rope they had used on me, she tied both herself and Julian to the back of a car. Julian immediately understood her plan and began to scream. "Chloe, you're insane. Are you trying to get us both killed?" The rope was secure. Chloe looked at the bodyguard in the driver's seat, her voice chillingly calm. "Drive." The engine roared to life, and she and Julian were thrown to the pavement like rag dolls. Julian's screams filled the air. Chloe's body was on fire with pain, but all she could think was, this is how much it must have hurt Ethan. This is how hopeless he must have felt. When the car finally stopped, she staggered to her feet and ordered the bodyguard, "Bandage his wounds." Julian, on the verge of passing out, looked up at her, a flicker of absurd hope in his eyes. Was she worried about him? Maybe after this, after they had both suffered, things could go back to the way they were. But Chloe gave him no such chance. The moment the fresh gauze was applied to his raw skin, she stepped forward, grabbed the edge of the bandage, and ripped it off. The world swam before Julian's eyes as fresh blood poured from his wounds. Finally, he passed out. A bucket of ice water shocked him back to consciousness. He was lying at the edge of a deep pit. The bottom, several feet down, was lined with sharpened steel spikes. He began to beg. "Chloe, please, I'm begging you." The words had barely left his mouth when she kicked him, sending him tumbling into the pit. The spikes pierced his arms, his stomach, his face. He tried to scream, but a spike had gone through his tongue, and all that came out was a spray of blood. Dirt began to fall on him from above. He struggled to look up and saw Chloe, her face a deathly gray, holding a shovel. She was starting to fill in the pit. She was going to bury him alive. The world went dark, and he passed out again. From outside the pit, he heard Olivia's voice. "Chloe, have you lost your mind?" She grabbed the shovel from her sister's hands. Looking at Chloe's own terrible injuries, she pleaded, "You can hate him. You can let the police handle him. But why are you doing this to yourself? Look at you." Chloe, covered in blood and dirt, stared back with empty, obsessive eyes. "It's not enough. Compared to what Ethan went through, this is nothing." She ignored Olivia's protests and ordered her men to pull the half-dead Julian from the pit and throw him in the car. The car sped off, heading back to the old estate. Julian came to as he heard the click of the front door being locked. He looked around, confused, then smelled the sharp, unmistakable scent of gasoline. He shot upright. The floors were dark and wet. She had doused the entire house in gasoline. A primal fear, unlike anything he had ever known, seized him. "Chloe, I'm sorry. I'll apologize to Ethan. I swear, I don't want to die." Chloe just stood there, hugging herself, lost in her own world. Julian knew it was useless. He ran to the door and started beating on it with his fists. "Help me! Somebody, help! She's going to kill me!" Behind him, Chloe calmly took out a lighter. A small flame flickered, then dropped to the floor. With a roar, the house erupted in a fireball, consuming everything, including the two figures inside. A blinding white light exploded from the base of the cherry tree, consuming the world. The branches of the tree began to grow again, blossoming in an instant. Sir, you can't go in there. This is the wedding of Miss Sutherland and Mr. Julian. You need an invitation." A doorman shoved me and I stumbled back. I slowly opened my eyes. I was standing under crystal chandeliers, surrounded by the noise of a crowd. Wasn't I dead? Chloe's wedding. I looked up and saw her inside the ballroom, beautiful in a white gown, gazing lovingly at her groom, Julian. The scene was painfully familiar. It was the day I had escaped the mine and come home. A wave of grief and anger washed over me. What did it matter if I had been reborn? It just meant I had to live through the cycle of abandonment, humiliation, and death all over again. I turned to leave. I wouldn't look back. The officiant's voice boomed through the speakers. "And now, the bride and groom will exchange rings." On the stage, Chloe suddenly flinched as if struck. She looked around, her expression shifting from confusion to shock, and then to pure joy. A moment later, her eyes found me at the entrance, and her face lit up. "Ethan!" I froze but did not turn around. But she was already running toward me, throwing her arms around me in a desperate embrace. "Ethan, it's really you. I was wrong. I was so wrong. I'll never let you go again." Her voice was choked with sobs, a mixture of relief and terror. This time, she hadn't made the irreversible mistake with Julian. She wasn't pregnant. This time, she could fix everything. She could finally be with me. Julian ran out after her, his eyes red with fury and humiliation. "Chloe, what are you doing? It's our wedding day. Everyone is watching." Mrs. Sutherland, Olivia, and Stella followed him out. The moment they saw me, their faces lit up with relief. "Ethan, you're back. We've been looking everywhere for you." They looked me over, but after a moment, the joyful atmosphere grew tense. I remembered my past life. I remembered screaming at them to get rid of Julian, the fight that followed, the bitter way we parted. This time, I said nothing. I just watched. Mrs. Sutherland pulled me into a hug, deliberately ignoring the scene Chloe was making. "Ethan, it's so good to have you back. Come inside, join the celebration. After the wedding is over, we'll have a proper party to welcome you home." Chloe ripped the corsage from her dress and threw it to the ground. "I am Ethan's fiancée," she declared. "I will only ever marry Ethan." The crowd fell silent. I stared at her, at this completely different Chloe, and for a moment, I couldn't process what was happening. Julian sank to the ground in shock. Mrs. Sutherland's face hardened. Chloe, what are you talking about? Olivia helped Julian to his feet, then turned on her sister. Have you lost your mind, Chloe? We're all happy Ethan is back, but you have to finish this wedding. Stella looked at me, her voice tinged with reproach. Ethan, we're glad you're back, but why did you have to show up right now? Couldn't this have waited until after the ceremony? Hearing those familiar, blaming words felt like my heart was being ripped open all over again. Even when I said nothing, it was still my fault. Between Julian and me, they would always choose him. Chloe hugged me tighter, then turned to the wedding guests. The wedding is off, she shouted. You can all go home. Before her mother could react, she added, and get Julian out of here. Now. Julian stumbled, nearly falling again. Mrs. Sutherland was furious. Julian is my son too. You have no right to send him away. Chloe gave a cold laugh and turned to Julian, who looked ready to break. Julian, do you want me to tell them everything? Right here, right now? The color drained from Julian's face, and his eyes darted around in panic. Chloe turned away from him and took my hand, her touch gentle as she stroked it. Come with me, Ethan, she said softly. I'll protect you, I promise. Before I could answer, she was pulling me out the door and into her car. The moment the car started moving, I knew Chloe had been reborn too, because we were heading straight for the hospital. The moment we parked, she was pulling me into the emergency room. Don't be afraid, Ethan. Just let them run some tests. I'll sell everything I own if I have to, but I will get you cured. In a daze, I let her lead me into an examination room. Fortunately, the news was good. The doctor reviewed the charts. The patient has some inflammation in his eyes, a poorly healed fracture in his left leg, and a severe case of gastritis. But with proper treatment, he can make a full recovery. I sat in the chair, silent, but Chloe understood. She wrapped her arms around me. I'm so sorry, Ethan. You've suffered so much. Our family owes you everything. I was a monster. I didn't protect you, but I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to you. I let her hold me, but I felt nothing. I found myself wondering what this protection of hers would look like. I would wait and see. Chloe leaving her own wedding threw the Sutherland family into chaos. Julian immediately called a meeting with Mrs. Sutherland and the other two sisters. Ethan was gone for 3 years, and he came back a blind cripple. He's not good enough for Chloe. She's completely lost her mind over him, calling off the wedding in front of everyone. If this continues, she'll ruin this family. We have to do something, Mrs. Sutherland agreed. This is a mess. Of course, now that Ethan is back, I'll treat him like my own son. But he and Chloe cannot be together. It's not that I'm looking down on him, but we took you in as well, Julian. We can't play favorites. Olivia cut to the chase. So what's the plan? A malicious glint appeared in Julian's eyes. What do you think would happen if Chloe thought she had driven her mother and me to suicide, all because of him? Stella's eyes lit up. She's such a devoted daughter. She'd be devastated. She'd realize her mistake and come back to us. Mrs. Sutherland nodded in agreement. Exactly. And when she's drowning in guilt, we'll reappear and tell her it was all just a lesson. She'll be sure to see things our way then. The four of them agreed on the plan and decided to put it into motion that night. When Chloe drove up to the mansion later, it was already in flames. Through the smoke, she could see Julian leaning out of an upstairs window. Chloe, he screamed, your mother snapped. She couldn't handle you sending me away, so she set the house on fire to kill us both. But Chloe didn't even look up at him. She was carefully helping me out of the car. Watch your head, she said softly. Olivia and Stella ran over to her, thinking she hadn't understood. Chloe, the house is on fire. Mom and Julian are still inside. But Chloe's expression remained cold and distant. She showed no sign of wanting to help. She even held back Olivia and Stella when they tried to run toward the house. It's a trick, she said. They're faking their deaths to frame Ethan. Her sisters stared at her, stunned. How could you possibly know that? Upstairs, the fire was spreading. Mrs. Sutherland was choking on the smoke. What's happening? I can understand Chloe not coming, but where are Olivia and Stella? Julian started to panic. He tried to smother the flames with a blanket, but it just caught fire, burning his hands. The only way out was the window. He scrambled onto the ledge, but just as he was about to jump, something grabbed his ankle. It was Mrs. Sutherland, grabbing onto him like a drowning woman. Julian, help me. Pull me up. Julian looked at the narrow ledge, which could only support one person. A wicked idea flashed through his mind. A fake death was good, but a real one was better. Only if their mother actually died would the sisters truly hate Ethan. They would cast him out, and everything the Sutherlands owned would be his. I'm sorry, Mom, he thought. You're more useful to me dead." A vicious look crossed his face as he kicked her hard in the chest. She screamed as she fell back into the inferno, and the flames immediately consumed her. Julian scrambled the rest of the way out the window, clinging to the frame and screaming, "Help! Somebody, help me!" Olivia finally snapped out of her shock. "Oh my God! Mom and Julian are still in there. We have to save them." By the time the fire was out, all they found was Julian, badly burned, clinging to the window ledge. And later, in the ruins, they found their mother's charred body. I looked at the body, but I felt nothing. What surprised me, however, was Chloe. She just stared at the scene, her expression cold, and finally uttered 2 words. "She deserved it." Julian fell to his knees before the body, putting on a show of grief so dramatic he looked like he might faint. "Mom, what a horrible way to die. You were supposed to live out your years in peace. What am I going to do without you?" Olivia and Stella were overcome with grief. They directed all their sorrow and anger at me. "This is all your fault. If you hadn't come back, Chloe wouldn't have tried to send Julian away, and our mother wouldn't have done this. You're the reason she's dead." Chloe squeezed my cold hand. "If you're going to blame Ethan for everything, then we're leaving." Stella sneered. "Fine, go. But you'll leave with nothing. You'll give up all your shares, all your assets in the Sutherland Corporation." I looked at Chloe. Would she really give up everything for me? Without a moment's hesitation, her eyes firm, she said, "Take it all. I only want Ethan." She took my hand, and we walked away into the night. She didn't even take her car. She just led me away on foot. We walked for what felt like hours, finally stopping in front of the old family estate. Standing there felt like stepping into another lifetime. Chloe found a small stool and wiped it clean. "Sit here, Ethan. I'll get the house cleaned up." This time, Chloe was full of a strange energy. I sat in the yard and watched her bustle about, running errands for new sheets, then disappearing into the kitchen. Before long, she had my old bedroom completely clean. I opened the door. In my old room, she had hung the little night light from her own childhood bedroom. She was sweating from her efforts, but she smiled and held out a bowl of dumplings. "I remember," she said, "shrimp dumplings. No ginger, no garlic, extra shrimp, extra vinegar." She looked at me with hopeful eyes, waiting for me to take the bowl, but I just walked over to the bed. "I'm tired," I said. "I want to sleep." Her hand faltered, and she stood there, frozen, for a long moment. Then she forced a smile. "Of course, you get some rest. I'll be right outside if you need anything." The door closed softly behind her. I wasn't tired at all. Through the window, I could hear the faint sound of a woman trying to stifle her sobs. I got out of bed and crept to the window. Through the glass, I could see Chloe sitting alone under the dead cherry tree, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Maybe, in this moment, she truly did regret what she had done. But the damage was done. My heart was long past feeling anything. I closed the window, got back into bed, and went to sleep. Over the next few days, Chloe used what little money she had left to fix up the old house. She took care of me, making sure I took my medicine, cooking all my favorite foods, trying desperately to atone for the past. But I remained like a doll with no soul. I didn't refuse her care, her apologies, her attempts to win me back. But I didn't respond to them either. On my birthday, she woke up early and cooked an enormous feast. Just as she lit the candles on the cake, the front door burst open. Olivia and Stella stormed in, supporting Julian between them. Olivia's eyes locked on Chloe. "So this is where you've been hiding," she said, her voice dripping with venom. "Julian has been wasting away, unable to eat or sleep, and you're here, throwing a birthday party for Ethan." Stella chimed in, "That's right. Ever since Mom died, Julian has been heartbroken. He's been desperate to see you." On cue, Julian collapsed at Chloe's feet. "Chloe, what did I do wrong? Why are you doing this to me? We promised we'd be together forever. How can you be so cruel?" Chloe set down the lighter and looked at her sisters with a scornful expression. "Why shouldn't I be? Olivia, Stella, when are you two going to wake up? Julian is a monster." Olivia trembled with rage. "Chloe, don't you dare talk about Julian that way." Before she could say more, the front gate was kicked open, and several rough-looking men stormed into the yard. Their leader looked around, his eyes finally settling on Julian. Well, Julian, we finally found you." Julian saw the men and immediately hid behind Olivia. "Who are you?" "I don't know you," the leader chuckled. "Forgot about us now that you've married into money? You've been ignoring our calls. Maybe we should tell your lovely new family all about our little arrangement." Julian quickly tried to pull the man aside. "Mr. Russo, I'll hold up my end of the deal, I promise. It's just not the right time." Russo slammed his fist on the table. "Not the right time? Bullshit. We had a deal. We get rid of Ethan for you, get you into this family, and you feed us corporate secrets. You got what you wanted, and then you ghosted us. He stepped closer, jabbing a finger in Julian's face. And what about what you promised? You swore you could get your sister-in-law, the medical examiner, to alter that autopsy report for us. You were going to make a murder charge disappear. Were you just stringing me along? Julian flinched and looked frantically at Olivia. No, that's not true, Russo sneered. Julian, if you can't deliver, you can pay up. $10 million. And I want every cent. Olivia and Stella looked as if they'd been struck by lightning. They both turned to the pale, trembling Julian. Is it true? Olivia asked. You conspired with them to steal from our company? You were going to ask me to falsify an autopsy report. Julian's lips trembled. I don't know who these men are. A calm, cold voice cut him off. I slowly rose to my feet and looked at Olivia and Stella. It's more than that. He would have convinced you to tie me to a motorcycle and drag me down the street. He would have had you bury me alive. He would have made you put a knife in my stomach. I spoke as calmly as if I were telling a story about a stranger. Olivia and Stella were completely lost. What are you talking about? But Chloe understood. And with that understanding, her last shred of hope died. I had been reborn, too. The chasm between us could never be bridged. At that moment, Julian, completely exposed, flew into a rage, turning all his fury on me. You worthless piece of trash. You should have just died in that mine. Why did you have to come back? You ruined everything. I'll kill you. He snatched a fruit knife from the table and lunged at me like a madman. In a flash, Chloe was standing in front of me, shielding me with her body. Ethan, look out! The cold blade sank into her stomach. For a moment, time stood still. A dark red stain spread across her shirt, blood dripping from Julian's hand. Julian, still holding the knife, began to laugh hysterically. If I can't have her, neither can you. He twisted the blade, his face a mask of insane rage. Olivia and Stella finally snapped out of their shock and tackled him to the ground. Seeing that things had turned deadly, Russo and his men slipped away. Chloe collapsed at my feet. In the ambulance, I could feel her consciousness fading, but her grip on my hand never loosened. She used the last of her strength to smile at me. I'm so afraid that if I let go, you'll disappear. I know I was wrong. In the next life, before she could finish, I reached over and, one by one, pried her fingers from my hand, extinguishing the last of her hope. I will never forgive you. The smile faded from her face, replaced by an expression of utter devastation. She opened her mouth as if to speak, but only a gush of blood came out. Her body convulsed once, and then she was still. Olivia and Stella let out a gut-wrenching scream. Chloe! Doctors and nurses rushed past me. Eventually, the light above the operating room door went out. A doctor emerged, shaking his head. I'm sorry. Chloe was dead. Julian was arrested for murder. Stella herself testified against him at the trial. He was found guilty and sentenced to death. After extensive treatment, my body fully recovered. I was whole again. When everything was over, Olivia and Stella came to me again and again, begging for my forgiveness through their tears. They had lost everyone, they said. They couldn't lose me, too. My answer was always the same, calm and final. There's no need. My debt to the Sutherland family has been paid. I bought a one-way ticket to Paris on the earliest flight I could find. As the plane climbed through the clouds, I leaned against the window and looked out at the endless white expanse. For the first time in a long, long time, I felt completely at peace. From now on, the world was wide open, and I would live only for myself.